let's get this archetype analysis rolling, because this is a 43 card archetype, which is a little long, yeah. But after that I'll have 3 short ones, so I'll be taking a bit of a break in that regard. So yeah, let's get it over with. We're taking a look at the Naturia archetype, which was used by Andre, which is one of the Team Unicorn members, and yeah, this is again falls into that category of one card being used as an archetype. Yeah, he summoned the synchro monster from this archetype, and yeah, that's about as far as it goes. If you remember Team Unicorn from earlier in the show, they were the ones who used the, well, Unicorn archetype, which I reviewed a while back. Anyway, yeah, let's start take a look at them, shall we? And first up we have Naturia Ladybug. This is a level 1 with 100 attack and defense, and when you synchro summon a Naturia synchro monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, and during your main phase you contribute this card to select one face-up Naturia monster you control. It gains 1000 attack until the end phase. This is I mean, you can summon this from your graveyard, but it would be a much better card if this was actually a tuner, since it's a level 1 and all. And not to mention that the attack boosting isn't a quick effect, so yeah, anything can run over it while you basically, well, you're most likely gonna be using using it on your turn, but still it's a bit too slow and inconsistent to the matter. So yeah, don't even bother with this one. I mean, it can be it can be decent link material, but still one if you really feel like it. Next up we have Naturia Mosquito. While you control another face-up Naturia monsters, your opponent while you control another face-up Naturia monsters, your opponent cannot select this card as an attack target. Oh, good God, what did I just do there? Your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving a face-up Naturia monster you control, except this card. Really, it's not worth discussing further because it's a very frail little attack redirector, and yeah, if it provided a Solar Flare Dragon or one Hopper Log, then I would have called it a decent card. But as it is now, it's not good. Amazoness Swordswoman is a way better option than this thing if you're into this kind of effect. The second part, of course. For next up, we have Naturia Vein. It's another level 1 and it's their first tuner. You contribute this card and one Naturia monster to negate the activation of an opponent's spell or trap card and destroy it. Please, please consider the following. The archetype already has has ways to negate spells or traps, which is leagues better than this gimmicky piece of crap. But oh, it's not once per turn, so we're immediately supposed to tolerate it, right? Jokes aside, you just don't run this. Their next monsters are Naturia Cherries. This is another level 1 tuner, and if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard by your opponent's card, including by battle or card effect or by being destroyed, you can special summon up to 2 Naturia Cherries from your deck in face down defense position. This is an okay effect, but yeah, it's a fine effect as far as this archetype goes. It can basically generates more fuel for Spore, which is a very welcome card in this deck. So yeah, it's usually ran at 3 if you choose to run it, but yeah, it's a card that you run by preference because yeah, it can provide some link materials, but it's a very hard bummer that you cannot trigger this effect yourself in order to get 2 free monsters. So yeah. Next up we have Naturia Cosmobeat. When your opponent normal summons or sets a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. Okay, nothing too spectacular. Again, it's a tuner monster, so it has some benefits from that. It's also their first level 2, which is not too shabby. Yeah, it's an okayish card. 1 or 2 of these should be perfectly fine. Next up we have a Naturia Endjaw. When your opponent special summons a monster, you can special summon 1 level 3 or lower Naturia monster from your deck. An okay effect, but the fact that this thing is of a fragile little level 2 the effect barely ever matters, and you usually run one or two of these because, well, it's a special summon from the deck after all. However, the this limitation to only level 3 or lowers can be a bit annoying, so yeah. Definitely worth at least one of these guys, but ratios all depend on you, in my opinion. Next up we have Naturia Eggplant. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can select one Naturia monster in your graveyard except Naturia Eggplant and add it to your hand. Graveyard recycling, it's perfectly fine. At the time of this, when this thing came out, it was perfectly okay. You can use it nowadays as the link material floating effect, which is usually very appreciated. But yeah, one or two of these is also pretty fine. Next up we have Naturia Sunflower. You contribute this card and one Naturia monster to negate the activation of an effect monster, of an effect monster or your opponent controls, and destroy it. Again, it's a non-once per turn negation of monster effects, but this one isn't even a tuner unlike Vayne, and yeah, it's all basically on the same level of usefulness here, which is none in the slightest. Again, the Archetype has a much better way of negating monster effects. Next up we have Naturia Tulip. While you control this face-up card, each time your opponent activates a spell or trap card, all face-up Naturia monsters you control gain 500 attack until the end phase. Pointless, again. Very pointless, because this is a tuner and you're most likely going to be using this as synchro material, and you're not going to have this thing stick around in the field for just a measly 500 attack point boost. It's too irrelevant, I tell you. Next up we have Naturia Beans, their final level 2. Once per turn, this card cannot be destroyed by battle. Well, this card is face-up. This face-up card is selected as an attack target. Inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Oh no, my 500 life points. Whatever will I do? Jokes aside, in way slower form, as this was a useful tech option for your first turn play, since you can set this and pass in order to ensure some field presence for your tribute monsters back in the day. But I doubt rarely anyone tribute summon during the synchro era that consistently. So no, then just not worth it. If you really want some tribute fodder and some battle indestructible monsters for, well, basically to further your plays, then Marshmallow is an objectively better choice. Next up we have Naturia Marin. It's their first level 3, and when this card is normal summoned, you can send one Naturia monster from your deck to the graveyard, and once per turn you can target 2 Naturia monsters in your graveyard, shuffle both those targets into the deck, and draw 1 card. Well, there we go. Now we're actually going somewhere, since this is actually their first decent monster. The worst thing about this, of course, is that it eats up your normal summon, which is something you really don't want to do most of the time. But as we'll see later, some of the later support helps out with unclogging your worst hands. So yeah. Also, it offers decent recycling. So yeah, and I'll draw a power for +1. So yeah. Next up we have Naturia Stingbug. This is a level 3 tuner, and when a face-up Naturia monster you control is selected as an attack target, you can send this face-up card you control to the graveyard to negate that attack and end the battle phase. For a tuner it's a fine effect, but again, you're most likely gonna be using all of your tuners until your opponent turns comes around for, well, synchro plays and link plays, needle fiber if you're in the OCG. Not to mention that this tuner has terrible stats for its levels. So yeah, you usually run this at 1 or 2 because it's a level 3 tuner, and that's about as far as it goes. Next up we have Naturia Ragweed. When your opponent draws a card, except during the draw phase, you can send this face-up card you control to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. If you were able to, like, send this card from your hand or banish it from the graveyard in order to activate this thing's effect, I would have called it an Eon's better card, because drawing cards is of course always nice, but the fact that you need to specifically have this on the field and have your opponent draw a card, not add to the hand, draw specifically cards. So yeah, it's a very very gimmicky kind of effect, and it's usually run at 1 max if you choose to run it. Next up we have Naturia Rock. When a trap card is activated, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard to special summon this card from your hand. This sounds very vaguely useful. While getting free monsters from your graveyard is always nice, the fact that trap card specifically needs to be activated renders it way too situational, since trap cards are very sparsely ran because they are slower by spell cards in nature. So yeah, this thing is not very relevant in that regard. Next up we have Naturia Rose Whip. Your opponent can only activate one spell or trap card per turn. A very decent lockdown effect, but the fact that this thing is this kind of effect is placed on such a low level and low attack monster, which is very frail and very prone to any kind of removal, is very bad and just not worth the effort. There's a reason why Great Shogun Shien sees as much play, because it's a formidable boss monster with a funky summoning condition, and it has that same effect, which makes him a genuine threat. This, not so much. Next up we have Naturia Butterfly. Once per turn, when your opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard and negate that attack. Again, why do tuners have these sort of effects which make them barely worth it, since tuner monsters are most likely gonna be used up for synchro plays, and as we'll see later on, their synchro monsters are very powerful. So yeah, well, some of them. So yeah, why would you place this effect on such a such a crap card? I mean, it's not a crap because it is a tuner, which is useful in the archetype, but still, you don't want it on the field for too long. Next up we have Naturia Fruitfly. All face-up monsters your opponent controls lose 300 attack and defense for each face-up Naturia monster you control. Once per turn, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls with 0 defense and take control of it until the end phase. Okay, so where the hell did the 0 defense thing come in? First of all, this thing is another frail monster which can get run over by absolutely anything. The attack decreasing the effect is pointless, and if you really want to focus on attack decreasing, just play freaking Reptilian or Venoms or something, although reconsider your life choices if you're playing that deck, since those decks are rancid garbage. Not to mention that it has to specifically have 0 defense, which is another lethal blow to this card's usefulness due to, guess what? Link monsters being a thing, so no. Next up we have Naturia Beetle. Switch the original attack and defense of this card each time a spell card is activated. I am getting... okay, we're already... I mean, this is their first level 4 and we are only a few cards in. Well, we've mostly done their main deck up until now, but these effects are getting very gimmicky, and I'm getting really tired from them already. And this is the prime example of gimmicky card design, which is just done as an obvious joke and nothing else. No, don't run this at all. Next up we have Naturia Cliff. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Naturia monster from your deck in face-up attack position. There we go! Something decent. This is a 3-off staple because special summoning from the deck is always nice. It special summons level 4 or lower, which is the majority of the main deck. And yeah, and not to mention you can special summon another Naturia Cliff, which is basically an archetypal attribute searcher, or type searcher if you will. So yeah, this is a 3-off staple in the build. Next up we have Naturia Dragonfly. This card cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster that has 2000 or more attack. This card gains 200 attack for each Naturia monster in your graveyard. Yeah, you're going to have a fair amount of them in your graveyard because the archetype is focused on synchro spamming, and well, you need to make some link monsters before you can actually go into synchro spamming. So yeah, I mean, it's some Powercrept, I mean, way worse obnoxious Celtic Guard, but still, it's a decent kind of protection. So yeah, I'd say run one if it's gonna make you special. Next up we have Naturia Guardian. When your opponent normal summons a monster, this card gains 300 attack until the end phase. I don't... I'm not even gonna say anything else. It's old, it's outdated, it's crap. Goodbye. No, I next monster. Naturia Horn Needle is their other monster, and when your opponent special summons a monster, you contribute one face-up Naturia monster you control except this card to destroy the special summoned monster. This is another effect which has the potential to be very good, which is, again, this isn't once per turn, mind you, and if you can somehow pull this effect on a frequent basis, then you can basically shut down an opponent's any kind of plays your opponent might be able to make, which is a very nice thing to do. Not to mention, this is an 1800 attack level 4, which is always appreciated, so yeah, this is a 2 or 3 off staple in my opinion. Next up we have Naturia Mantis. When your opponent normal summons a monster, you can send one Naturia monster from your hand to the graveyard to destroy that monster. Not good. Again, it falls under the same category as Guardian, but it's a bit more applicable than Guardian, since destroying the monsters on summon is a bit is a very nice card. But this, I actually have to give the praise to this card that you can actually discard a monster, well, send a Naturia monster from your hand to the graveyard to do that. As all other monsters require you to tribute a Naturia monster, which implies that you have to already have an established field in order to get those effects off. So yeah, this is a one-off because normal summoning is, well, you can only normal summon once per turn. And yeah, most decks usually perform like 7 billion special summons per turn, so yeah. Next up we have Naturia Pumpkin. When this card is normal summoned, if your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon one Naturia monster from your hand. Yeah, this is a nice card. It's basically your engine Kickstarter, since you can summon this onto the field and then special summon some more monsters which chain into some other monsters. We'll mention this later at the grading scale, what you can possibly do in order to get some potential versatility here. So yeah, this is a 2 or 3 off staple in my opinion. Next up we have Naturia Strawberry. Once per turn you can normal or special summon. Once per turn when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, target one of those monsters. This card gains 100 attack times the level of that monster until the end phase. Yeah, another in the great line of ultra pointless Naturia effects, and not to mention that this thing is 50% useless at the time because Link and Xyz monsters still exist, and yeah, it's just bad. No, I don't, and not to mention the attack boost is barely relevant. So yeah. Next up we have Naturia Spider Fang. This card cannot declare an attack unless your opponent activated a spell, spell or trap effect or monster effect this turn. Oh boy, this is another one of those monsters with 2000 or more attack which has obnoxiously bad restrictions to them because the poor meta couldn't handle it back in the day. So yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory that you don't run this at all. Next up we have their final level 4, Naturia White Oak. When this card is targeted by an opponent's card effect, you can send this face-up card you control to the graveyard to special summon 2 level 4 Naturia monsters from your deck. They cannot declare an attack and they are destroyed during the end phase. I would have loved this so much more if this was like a Lonefire Blossom kind of effect where you can just tribute it or send it to the graveyard to pull this effect off. Yeah, you still keep the destruction effect until the end phase because yeah, it's a price you have to pay for summoning so many monsters. Well, 2 of them in that case. Back in the day especially, that was a powerful effect. And yeah, you're most probably gonna use the monsters very well when you summon them this way, so it shouldn't be that much of a biggie. But as it is right now, it specifically needs to be targeted by an opponent's card effect in order to use this effect, which makes it irrelevant in the grand scheme of things and just not worth running. Next up we have their first level 5, Naturia Hydrangea, whatever, tongue twisting myself here today again. Noble Knights give me a run for my money when I reviewed them. If the effect of a Naturia monster you control was activated during this turn, you can special summon this card from your hand. It's a perfectly fine card because, first of all, it's not a once per turn, and while it might be a level 5 with terrible stats, it usually is. You usually manage to special summon it 99% of the time because you'll be activating a lot of Naturia effects. So, yeah, usually run 2 or 3 of these. Next up, we have Naturia Bamboo Shot. If this card is tribute summoned by tributing a Naturia monster while this card remains face up on the field, your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards. Oh, this is actually a pretty nice disabling, in fact, no question about it. The only bummer, of course, being that you need to specifically tribute summon this thing, and not to mention that it's prompt to any kind of removal, meaning your opponent will have to specifically use monster effects or Kaiju's Lava Golem or Volcanic Queen to get rid of this. So yeah, the latter you can circumvent with Mask of Restrict, and if you can somehow manage to negate monster effects such as Effect Veiler, which is a very welcome card in the archetype because of, yeah, you basically got the gist of what the archetype is focused on doing. The archetype focuses on negating effects in various ways, so yeah. It has tolerable stats for a level 5, and yeah, it's okay. And if you really want to make yourself a fun challenge by building a Naturia Bamboo Shot control build, you definitely go for it. And their final main deck monster is the level 6 Naturia Stag Beetle. Once per turn during the battle step or damage step of this card's attack, when your opponent activates a card effect, you can select one Naturia monster in your graveyard, special summon that monster from the graveyard. It's a tolerable revival effect. It can potentially let you revive your fallen extra deck monsters, which is highly appreciated. But the fact that your opponent needs to again do stuff is very not worth it because it specifically needs to happen during the bad damage step or battle step, meaning your opponent most probably you will have to activate a monster effect in order to use in order for you to be able to use this, which is a bit too specific since, yeah, this card comes from a time when battle traps were a bit more rampant, so yeah, questionable one-off in my opinion. Alright, now going on to their extra deck. First up we have Naturia Beast. This is a level 5 synchro monster, requires 1 Earth Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Earth monsters. And when a spell card is activated, quick effect, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it, and this card must be face up on the field in order to resolve this effect. And next up we have Barkion, which is a level 6, which has the exact same summoning condition, but 300 more attack and 100 more defense, and has the exact same effect for as Beast, but only it works on trap cards by banishing 2 cards from the graveyard. Sounds ridiculous? It absolutely is, but it came from a different time, and yeah, it's we'll get more into them later. Next up we have Naturia Landois. This is a level 7, which has again the same summoning conditions as the first 2 monsters, and has 2350 attack, so rev up those calculators, folks, and 1600 defense. And when this card is face up on the field, you can send 1 spell card from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation, and if you do this, negate the activation of an effect monster's effect and destroy it. This is another very strong disabling effect, and just like the previous 2, it's not once per turn, and here's the problem. It specifically requires you a spell card and to be discarded in order to pull this effect off, which renders it way too specific for its archetype, and unless you can somehow make this consistently in a Sky Striker build, it's not worth it, honestly. And, oh boy, the next up we have Naturia Leodrake, which is the monster that appeared in 5Ds and made this archetype legitimate for it to be reviewed. It's a level 9, which has the exact same summoning condition as all synchro monsters before and has no effects. Yes, this is the 3rd synchro monster, which is a non-effect monster. The first 2 being Gaia the Knight, the Force of Earth, and Scrap Archfiend. So yeah. This is one of the worst synchro monsters of all time, because not only is it does it not have an effect and it's a level 9, It also has specific summoning conditions on top of all that. Definitely not the lion we were looking for in order to protect the forest. A lion very much worth mentioning, however, is Leo, Keeper of the Sacred Tree. It's completely generic. It's a level 10, 3100 attack and 1900 defense, and your opponent cannot target this card with card effects except during your main phase 2. And yeah, this is a very strong effect because you usually do not go into main phase 2 most of the time because, well, if you play a Naturia build, you usually set your back row in main phase 1 because this thing is just that good. It's a huge beat stick and it has very nice protection, and yeah, it's overall a very nice card, and some of their spell and trap cards make it an even better card. And just to accentuate how great this card is, this is basically ran as a boss monster in most synchro builds because, again, it's completely generic and the protection it has is just that great. It's one of the best synchro monsters of all time. So yeah. Alright, that was their final synchro monster, and now we have their two fusion monsters. First up we have Naturia Exterio, which requires specifically Naturia Beast and Naturia Barkion in order to be summoned, and a fusion of this card can only be conducted with the above fusion material monsters. While this card is face up on the field, you can negate the activation of a spell, trap, and destroy it, and remove it from by removing from play one card from your graveyard, and then sending the top card of your deck to the graveyard. And yeah, this is one of the best fusion monsters of all time because it combines the effects of Naturia Beast and Barkion and just makes them overall better. The cost of this of pulling off this effect is basically banishing a card from the graveyard, because milling a top card from your deck is basically a plus for the archetype, well, plus for basically any deck. And this fusion monster is one of the reasons why Cyberstein was banned for so long, but now it's come back to 1 since the game has been infected with link monsters. And yeah, still, this is an absolute beast of a monster, and I wish it had a bit more attack points while we're at it, but as it is now, it's a very formidable archetypal boss monster and should always be ran in any Naturia build and aiming to win consistently. Next up we have their final monster, that being Naturia Gaia's Trio. This is another level 10 with 3200 attack and 2100 defense. This one requires 2 Earth Synchro monsters in order to be summoned, and during either player's turn, when a card or effect is activated that targets exactly one card on the field and no other cards, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Even though this is perfectly decent, I still think that Naturia Exterio is a much better boss monster, because if you have both of them on the field, then you're perfectly fine from any form of back row, and while you have this on the field, you're saved from like 30% of monster effects, which is a good protection but not good enough, meaning you have to invest in Mask of Restrict in order to protect yourself from 30% more of monster effects, since kaijus are a thing. So yeah, that only leaves the non-targeting removal, which the archetype does not have that much protection from, which is their one of their downsides in my opinion. Next up we have Naturia Forest. Now, their field spell. If you negate the activation of a card your opponent controls, you can add one level 3 or lower Naturia monster from your deck to your hand. The archetype does not have a very consistent way of negating cards as well itself, but it says negating the activation in any way, meaning you can actually use floodgates or any other cards, and we'll get to later about the floodgates part. And the search effect is fine. I would have loved it if it let you add any member of the archetype, because this archetype could use a bit better consistency. However, there's another thing we'll talk about in a minute. Next up we have Barkion's Bark. Activate only if you control a face-up Naturia monster. Your opponent cannot activate trap cards this turn. A Trap Pause. Yeah, this is a spell card version of Trap Stun. So yeah, I would have loved it more if it was a quick play, because the opponent can still negate it with something. So yeah. I would have loved it eons more if it was a quick play. Overall, a decent card, a one-off in my opinion. Next up, we have the Landoises and Luminous Moss. Activate only if you control a face-up Naturia monster. The opponent's effect monsters cannot activate their effects this turn. An on-field, on a nuke effect veiler, basically, in terms of how you use this. And again, I would have loved it much more if it was a quick play because, well, that's how the archetype functions. You need to work your ass off to quickly negate those effects. So yeah, it's again a one-off in my opinion. And their last spell card is Leo Drake's Mane. Select one face-up Naturia monster you control. Its attack becomes 3000, and its effects are negated until the end phase. Yeah, Leo Drake's bad nature does not leave our scorned sides because, yeah, while it can turn even your weakest monsters into more formidable beat sticks, still it's not very reliable and it's not searchable by the archetype in any way. So yeah, don't bother with this one, I tell you. Next up we have Exterio's Fang, their first trap card. It's a counter trap that you can activate only if you control a face-up Naturia monster and have at least one card in your hand. Negate the activation of an opponent's spell or trap card and destroy it, then send one card from your hand to the graveyard. It's an archetypal Omni Negation. Well, yeah, it is a bit more costlier than some other archetypal Omni Negations or Omni Negations in general, but still, that doesn't mean you should run any less than 3 of these because, yeah. And their last card is the continuous trap Naturia Sacred Tree. If this card is in the graveyard, add one Naturia, is sent to the graveyard, add one Naturia card from your deck to your hand, except Naturia Sacred Tree. You can only use one of the following effects of Naturia Sacred Tree once per turn, and only once that turn. You contribute one Earth Insect type monster, special summon one level 4 or lower Earth and Plant type monster from your deck. You contribute one Earth Plant type monster and special summon one level 4 or lower Earth Insect type monster from your deck. And this thing is basically a 3-off staple in any Naturia build because it actually manages to unclog your worst Naturia hands, and it also applies on any Earth Insect and any Earth Plant type monster, which makes Trap Tricks a very welcome choice in the deck. And basically Naturia nowadays cannot focus and consistently and cannot function without Trap Tricks. So yeah, and that's it for Naturia. Wow, that was somewhat fast in my opinion. In terms of consistency, their only option here is Naturia Sacred Tree, which is an unsearchable continuous trap card, and yeah, even if you do run 3 of them, you don't have it. It can get negated or basically sent back to the deck, which means the archetype is off to a bad start when it comes to that. Trap Tricks do help out a little by searching various floodgates with what the archetype could continue their plays, but still it's not very worth it to mention, and not to mention that this thing is very flimsy when it comes to Naturia, so 1 out of 3 in my opinion is somewhat acceptable here. Power values are usually very low, and they usually depend on their extra deck monsters being brought out, which is not something that is usually not very consistently done. Naturia Beast and Naturia Barkion have decent power values. Naturia on the Leo Guardian of the Sacred Tree is absolutely ridiculous. But in pure Naturia builds is a bit too hard to summon. So yeah, just because Exterio, Leo, and the Beast and Barkion exist, I'm gonna give them a 2 out of 3. And if it were a bit more realistically made, then it would be a 1 out of 3 because Naturias really have trouble with summoning their extra deck monsters. Comeback ability is very low. Even though the archetype is focused on massive effect negation, once you shut them down, there's pretty much no coming back unless Trap Tricks do a miracle or something. In terms of protection, they're sort of lacking in this point. I mean, Exterio and Beast and Barkion have decent protection effects from like locking you out of the entire back row, and Leo has the protection of its own, which is very nice. But but generally these monsters are very rarely summoned because it's too difficult for the archetype to summon them, so it's a bit lower than that. Still though, due to the fact that Leo and Exterio actually exist, I feel obligated that they deserve at least a 2 out of 3 in terms of protection. Versatility also gets a 2 out of 3 because they on by themselves the versatility would be a hard 1 out of 3. Well, with the Trap Tricks engine, they can certainly kickstart themselves very decently and search out trap holes, which makes them very versatile in terms of most other archetypes, because an archetype that has access to do floodgate searchers is nothing to laugh at. So yeah, I'll be generous and give him a 2 out of 3 in that regard. So yeah, Naturia is definitely one of the uniquer and more gimmicky side of Yu-Gi-Oh! It was a fun review to make in my opinion, and yeah, I don't think the dual terminal monsters rarely ever get some new support cards, so it's even questionable if Naturias will get new support cards. So yeah, all we have to do is wait and see. We only have 4 archetypes left to review, and then I am done. Yay. With archetype analysis, then I will be doing something else. You'll see. Anyway, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all, have a good day, and peace!